7 Days to Die is a game of survival. One where you, the player, are tossed into a landscape of desolation and told, good luck, with only a few starting tips on how to make it in this world. When I first started playing the game around 6 years or so ago, I had a lot of questions. The funny thing is, I still have a lot of questions. Questions like, who are we? Where are we? How did we get here? What happened? How long has this zombie apocalypse thing been going on? Why are we so alone, usually? Where is everyone? Why are these traitors just big chillin' everywhere? How are you? Where is the military? Why don't I sleep? And why did I start playing this game at 8 PM only to blink and check the clock and now it's 2 AM somehow? How did that happen? Let's dive into this. The game, honestly, just doesn't give you much. When it was first released, the devs, the Fun Pimps, teased it eventually having a real story. But nearly 7 years later, there's no concrete sign of that happening. There just isn't a storyline. There isn't a trail of quests that lead to figuring out what the hell is going on. It's just a game. But there doesn't have to be a story if the gameplay loop is entertaining. But there are in fact some clues scattered about Navezgane, Arizona, the default setting for the game. There are newspapers, ruins, supply caches, and other contextual happenings that may give us some idea of what's really going on here. This video doesn't assume that there's a well-established lore in 7 Days to Die. Many mechanics are clearly there to be nothing more than fun mechanics because it's a video game. I mean, a zombie busting through a concrete wall sounds pretty ridiculous. Clearly some of this is not meant to be looked into very deeply. So, I'm going to look into all of that very deeply and see what kind of stories we can come up with. I'll assume everything we can find for a reason, and that anything and everything can be a clue. My goal by the end of this video is to review whatever we can find, piece by piece, and at the end of it all, construct the most complete and reasonable story I can. So buckle in, it's gonna be a really, really bumpy ride. Also, the seatbelts don't work and the rails are on fire. So with that, let's start from the start. Who are we? When you start a new game in Navezgane, you typically spawn half naked with nothing but some basic survival supplies. Some water, some food, some first aid. That's pretty much it. You also typically spawn next to an old car and some boxes, crates, and bags, though this isn't always the case. Regardless, when you spawn in, there are two other things of note. Notes. So the first thing you are met with is this, a note from a kind stranger. It reads, "Dear friend, the wasteland can be an unforgiving place. I found you naked and left for dead with no supplies. It looks like you crossed the Duke in a bad way and you could use some help. Enclosed is a short guide to help you survive. If you complete it, we might just take in a new citizen. The White River Settlement. It's real and it's safe. Peace be with you, Noah." So we were just somebody passing through the area, probably on the brink of death, and this guy just found us and saved us. Sort of? This doesn't tell us much about our character, but the White River Settlement. We'll take a look at that later. But what about the Duke? What or who is the Duke? Well, luckily, the next clue in our starting inventory tells us a little bit more. We have a note from the Duke, and it reads, "Just a friendly reminder that you pay on time every time, or there will be consequences. Next time, we won't be so nice. Thanks for the gear, but you still owe us. See you soon." Okay, so we weren't just passing through, we live here, and the Duke is some mob tyrant that threatens survivors in Navezgane for protection money. Well, we still don't know a whole lot about ourselves. What we can surmise, though, is that we live in Navezgane, probably previously just a nomadic scavenger barely scraping by, given we don't have any sort of starting base. We either couldn't or wouldn't pay the Duke and his gang, and so they kicked our ass and left us half naked and with barely anything on us for good old Noah to come around and drag us to relative safety. Okay, that's a start, and that all seems fair. Vague and basic backstory for a vague and frankly basic setting, but there are some less conventional ideas the community has floated around. Maybe, and I mean just maybe, we're a robot. Or at least some sort of android or something less than fully human. I know, immediately it sounds ridiculous, but there's actually some evidence this could be the case. I mean, firstly, and most importantly, we don't sleep. The option isn't even there. I know there are plenty of games where you don't have to sleep, but the option is usually there. In those games, you're clearly not a robot because you can sleep. In 7 Days to Die, it's not an option for us at all. But when you do die in-game, you wake up at or near your bedroll. I mean, those are literally your only two options. So maybe when you die, the game is explaining your respawning away as you just having a nightmare? I mean, that would make sense. I'm sure I'd be having trouble sleeping and probably experiencing nightmares when I do sleep if I were trying to survive in such an apocalypse. Sure, but any changes you make to the world and any looting you've done remains even after death. It doesn't revert back. So maybe we are just an intelligent robot, one that doesn't sleep, but simulates needing to sleep, and eat, and drink, and has to deal with the elements, learning to construct makeshift tools and equipment, and becoming stronger, and faster, and smarter, as we traverse the zombie-infested lands planted here by the government, in an effort to experiment to see if a human could possibly actually survive the zombie apocalypse. This would also explain why zombies can bust through walls and detect us from vast distances, and hunt us relentlessly. It would explain why large concentrations of zombies are found in areas with lots of loot, some even hidden to try to catch us off guard as we scavenge for supplies we don't even really need because we're a robot. That, or people hide, people congregate, people die in an apocalypse. Now that I've had my fun, and I've probably driven away half of the people that clicked on this video, there are probably lots of zombies in high loot areas because they were staying where supplies were before they were turned. The android idea is a fun one to think about that does actually answer a lot of questions about how and why the game is the way it is. But at the end of the day, many of these unrealistic mechanics are unrealistic because it's a video game. Or is it? Fuck. That's staying in the video. For now, without any further evidence to suggest who we are or where we came from, we can get to some interesting world building stuff. In a zombie apocalypse, there are already a lot of questions to be asked. In 7 Days to Die, there are even more. Like, what caused the zombie outbreak? What happened? Maybe let's start this time with what we can for sure gather in-game. First, there are 2 newspapers you can find scattered about the game on the ground. You can't actually pick them up, but we can take a look at the blurry and damaged articles and get 2 big details to play with. One headline from The Daily News, very imaginative, simply states, "Flu epidemic." Another says nuclear something. It looks like a D starts the next word, so I'm going with nuclear devastation. We can't see any legible dates on the papers, so all we have are 2 mildly vague events that happened at some point before everything went to hell. Nuclear bombs and a flu epidemic. There are some other in-game hints though as to what's actually going on here, or at least what went on. Higashi Pharmaceutical used to be the 2nd tallest building in the game, and it houses some interesting secrets. Deep within the labs of Higashi, we can actually find zombies in test tubes. Now, in the video you're watching now, you won't see zombies in test tubes, but you will see the areas where the zombies broke out of them. And I can tell you they were in the test tubes. I just alerted them on my way up to this area. They're incredibly tough zombies, by the way, not fun to deal with, but what's going on here? We could immediately jump to the conclusion that Higashi created the zombies, but given the flu newspaper, it seems more likely Higashi is, or was, working on a cure. There are several running theories in the community trying to depict what the actual timeline is here, and I have some of my own, but perhaps this flu going around was turning people into zombies. As the problem became more and more serious, any and all medical facilities began dedicating all of their resources to developing a cure. But when the situation started getting really out of hand, nukes were launched to contain completely or near completely infected areas. From there, nuclear war, give it some time and we end up with 7 Days to Die. My personal theory, however, is slightly different. COVID-19, I mean, some strange new flu starts plaguing the world. Nukes were dropped on hot zones to try and contain it because world leaders are usually nut jobs to some degree, and some time passes, giving way to three things. First, newspapers and articles have time to flood the environment reporting on nuclear devastation and on this flu. A full-on nuclear war develops as nations try to contain each other, giving way to some of the harsh and desolate areas we can find in-game. Then, the massive amount of radiation infecting the Earth mutates that flu, creating a new zombie flu that eventually overtakes everything. Probably. The biggest hole in that theory, though, is that none of the zombies seem to be prepped for a zombie apocalypse. We find zombies in business attire still in offices, lumberjacks in flannels in the woods, cheerleaders and football players still in their uniforms, and so on and so on. Which to me seems to imply the zombie outbreak occurred very, very suddenly. One moment, everyone's living their lives. The next, everything changed when the Fire Nation zombie apocalypse. Either way, we can be quite certain that nuclear detonations and a flu epidemic were involved in the creation of the zombies, or at least the setting the zombies are in. Maybe the flu alone created zombies and the bombs created the landscape. There's not much more to go off of in this regard. Or is there? You know, I've spent, frankly, a silly amount of time performing research for this video, and I'm embarrassed to say there's one big clue to the story that I didn't find until well into the process of writing this, and this comes right off the top of the game's Gamepedia wiki. Now, as far as I can tell, this is an unofficial description for 7 Days to Die, but it's floating all over, so it reads as follows. In the near future, the Third World War leaves the Earth in ruins, but the worst has yet to come. In the year 2013, nuclear attacks have decimated the Earth, and the remaining population is infected by an unknown virus. Nobody knows for sure if it was the radiation, the biochemical weapons, or an act of God, but an unknown virus soon transformed the surviving humans into an army of the animated dead, acting as a single-minded being. The infected die within 7 days, and soon reanimate, becoming bloodthirsty zombies. No one believed it, nobody expected it, and nothing can stop it. You play a survivor trapped in the savage, zombie-infested world of Navezgane County, Arizona, one of the last true Edens on Earth. Ironically, Navezgane means killer of monsters to the Apache who have inhabited the land for centuries, and that's pretty much what you'll do as you fight to survive and search for the truth behind what really happened. Well, that is enlightening, but let's break this down one step at a time. Third World War, nuclear detonations, that much makes sense. That tracks. The year 2013 is when this occurs. Okay, sure. Biochemical weapons. Where did that come from? Actually, I have no idea. A single-minded zombie being. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense, actually. The zombies do seem to quite often act as one, except when they don't. The infected die within 7 days. So, this description seems to be implying that the title of the game is about how long it takes for the something to turn you into a zombie, not about the blood moon that turns the night sky red and occurs every 7 days, sending a ruthless horde of zombies at the player. Well, okay, let's be reasonable. Maybe it's both. Navezgane being one of the last Edens on Earth does at least make a lot of sense. I'll give that one. Given the borders of the world are full of such intense radiation, you just can't pass them. And finally, Apache. Cool, there are nods to that in-game in certain locations and with certain items. That one also tracks. Now, I have to admit, there are some bits in there that make a lot of sense, but the timeline and a lot of the details just don't make sense given the evidence we have been and will be looking at. I don't know where they came from. Who decided this occurs in 2013? That doesn't make a lot of sense given the setting and when the game actually came out. Who decided that biochemical weapons were involved? Where do you find any information regarding that? It seems like a lot of this was just kind of added in for flavor without any actual substantial evidence of any of this occurring in-game. Now, I felt the need to bring this description up despite the flaws I perceive in it, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, when I found it, I had a feeling that anybody watching this video might know of it and comment about it and say, look, this answers half the questions you attempted to answer yourself, and it says different things. Secondly, it shows up online a lot. And I mean a lot. But mostly on server lists and other unofficial sites not associated with the fun pimps. The most quote-unquote official place I can trace this description is to the Gamepedia wiki. interestingly enough, the official Wikipedia page on wikipedia.com for 7 Days to Die doesn't mention this description at all. So, frankly, as far as I can tell, some early fan probably wrote this for the Gamepedia wiki, and it became the sort of official, unofficial description of the world. I'm not so sure of it, though. I mean, it mentions that this all happens in the near future, quote-unquote, in 2013, but the game wasn't even released until December of 2013. Though I'm totally willing to be wrong here. Despite this description's accuracy, meaning half of my video is completely null and void, I'd like to know. So if you have any information regarding it, let me know in the comments below. I promise I would love to check it out. I want to drop this, but there is one more place this description could have come from. 7 Days to Die started on Kickstarter in July of 2013. So why don't we take a little trip to that old page and see if we can dig anything up. Oh wow, okay, hold on. There is a story section on the Kickstarter. My god, maybe this did come from the Fun Pimps. Let's take a look. Oh, well, I guess that's another dead end. So, with no other evidence to support the validity of that description of the game, I'm going to move on, assuming it is not official, especially given all the inconsistencies with what I've thus far found. If it turns out to be official, then I'll have to admit a lot of my research has been for nothing, but for now, we move on. Hey, hello, me from the future. I just wanted to throw this quick addendum in here. I know I spent way too long on this unofficial official description, but I was editing the video and I was like, why didn't I ever just look? Why didn't I look harder for an official description of the game from the Fun Pimps? So I did that, and I can report that I was like 90% right. That description is not official. It does not come from the Fun Pimps. I found the Fun Pimps official description of 7 Days to Die on their website, and there are a couple of things that this unofficial description does take right out of this, such as Navezgane being one of the last true Edens on Earth, or the bit about the Third World War happening. That is all true. That is all canon as according to the official description from the Fun Pimps. But most of their official description is about the gameplay, talking about how it's a tower defense, role-playing game, first-person shooter, survival horror, all these things together. It's mostly talking about the gameplay. They don't expand much on the story or the universe or any of that. So, TLDR, I was mostly right, but there are a couple of things from the unofficial description that do come straight from the official description. So, moving on, that chapter is closed. Thank you. So, if not in 2013, how long ago did this all happen? We do get several clues in-game as to when all of this went down. Context clues, really, but the first big hint is actually the vehicles. Most of the vehicles you can find in-game look pretty similar. They're mostly just color variations, and many have speculated online that they look a lot like mid to late 80s Hyundai Sonatas. Take this and the general architecture of buildings, the way zombies are dressed, and honestly, kind of just the feeling of the game. Our best guess is probably that everything really fell apart in the late 80s, maybe early 90s. Another vehicle we can see every so often in the game is an aircraft that flies overhead and delivers supplies of varying helpfulness. Now, the glimpse we can get of it in-game isn't great, so from the vague pictures I could find online, I spent far too long trying to figure out what the aircraft might actually be, and to be honest, I don't have a solid answer. But the overall design resembles military aircraft designs of a couple of certain eras. It could be a C-46 or 47 used in World War II, or maybe even an AN-24 used in the 60s. But this vague detail doesn't quite match up with the more concrete evidence of vehicles littering the ground, so more on this later. We can also look at the zombies themselves. Many of them show a lot of decomposition, many more not so much. And now that how long does it take for a human body to decompose is in my Google search history, I can tell you with confidence that it takes on average about 8 to 12 years. Assuming this zombie flu doesn't somehow slow the rate of decomposition, it's fair to say the zombies haven't been decomposing for very long, certainly not as long as 8 years. Again, there are varying levels of decomposition among different zombies, and for some reason a lot of them are missing just one eye, but most of them are still quite visibly human. Skin discoloration and some festering wounds are common, but most skin is still quite present. Not a fun topic, I know, but if we're taking everything we can get, then this tells us something. Whatever moment was really the start of the apocalypse was probably within the last year at most. I have seen some people online try to say it's been much longer, as most of those Sonata-esque vehicles you find are quite dirty and rusted. But that doesn't prove much. Firstly, it doesn't take a vehicle long at all, really, to start showing visible rust in the right conditions. Conditions such as, I don't know, nuclear detonations violently throwing elements such as dirt and water every which way. Leave that car out in the middle of the road with nothing to protect it, and the oxidation will leave visible rust in no time after something like that. And it'll be caked in dirt, thrown about by the explosions as well. So now we sort of have an idea of who we are, and how we got here, and when this all happened. So, what's left? Well, the most obvious place to begin here is the strange landscape. Small cities completely torn apart by nuclear devastation, other bombings, or the zombies themselves, most likely all three. We also see stretches of land inhospitable to most life due to what seems to have been bombing. Given the lack of radiation and the craters that spread throughout it, these are probably the remnants of war or of containment efforts. But we can also find lush forests and stretches of wilderness seemingly untouched by this whole nightmare, other than the zombies roaming through them. We can explain most of that, especially with any of our previous theories as to what's going on. We're an android being tested on survivability, in which case the array of climates and settings seems quite fitting. Or we're truly in one of the last hospitable places on Earth, in which case that in itself kind of explains the untouched areas. Once again, it would make sense either way, given the living people we deal with in-game. Well, that's a bit misleading. We do get to interact with some living people, but only in the form of traders. Perhaps these traders are among the last survivors in Navezgane, both those we're aware of and unaware of. We know of the White River settlement. In fact, several traders fly the White River flag over their posts. We also know of Duke's gang, all too well. But there are other gangs or factions we can hear about via various notes, which give us quests or missions in-game. Even the traders that don't fly flags probably belong to one of these groups of people, or they could just be surviving on their own, still biting chunks off the delicious fruits of capitalism, which for some reason persists in the apocalypse.
Come near me again, and I'll cut you.
We don't ever actually run into any of these factions, other than through their traders, maybe. We can, however, find some of their settlements and bases, empty and seemingly abandoned. These are the only signs we can find of our note-leaving friends. Perhaps the zombies took them, perhaps the zombies within the bases are them. Seems more and more like we, the player, and the traders are the only living humans left around here. Except, remember that plane we discussed earlier? What is that all about? Who's doing that? To be honest, there's really no evidence that can give us any real hints to help us answer those questions, but we can speculate. If we go off of what we've speculated before, assuming the plane is a little old, it seems unlikely the people sending in supplies are military or government. They could be, but I find it much more likely that far more efficient and modern aircraft, relative to the time period of the game we believe it's in, would be used. It's possible this is some other private group, perhaps a larger group of survivors in a better off area nearby. They can't get to us safely, though, through the radiation, and they can't land to pick us up, given the large number of infected in the area. So, they drop in whatever supplies they can. How they know we're alive is unclear. Perhaps they've used that plane for scouting and happened to spot people. Or, we're definitely an android and the government is sending in various supplies to see what would be the most helpful to us in the simulated survival scenario. Who knows? Other than that, though, there's not a whole lot left. There is evidence of these other survivors in the area, boarded up houses, fortifications, weapons, and loot caches, but never any survivors to be found, only more dead and, well, undead. So it's likely these things aren't evidence of people sheltering before this all went down, but actually just fortifications developed by survivors after. So what's our final verdict? What might the full story actually be? I think there are two most likely possibilities here, and this last part of the video is going to be the telling of those two stories. You, the player, are an intelligent android. You were developed by the government in a secret project to test and research survivability and survival tactics, as well as reconstruction efforts in a post-World War III scenario. Plopped down in the middle of a controlled environment, you have no memories, only one directive: survive. You were booted up in a random location with nothing but basic supplies and a couple of notes to get you started. You are secretly watched as you struggle to survive and overcome the inhospitable environment of this fake county called Navezgane, Arizona. Various caches and loot is spread throughout the area to test your scavenging patterns. Airdrops are flown in with various supplies to test what would be the most useful in this scenario. Trading stations run by other, less intelligent androids are dispersed throughout the area to gauge trading habits and see what would be the most valuable in an apocalyptic setting. Finally, hordes of, hopefully, fake zombies are unleashed upon you, the android player, every 7 nights, to test survival tactics. These hordes become increasingly dangerous as time progresses and as scientists behind screens push the limits of what one resourceful person can survive. Until eventually the simulation ends with your shutdown, when you, the player, close the game and eventually never return. It's all a simulation. You are an android, and none of this is real. You, the player, are a survivor of the Third World War, just trying to survive in Navezgane, Arizona. You spent a few months getting by, just scavenging the land, living a terrifying and nomadic lifestyle, taking shelter wherever you could. Unfortunately, a ruthless bandit leader known only as the Duke has taken up the responsibility of collecting taxes and providing protection for the people of Navezgane. When you fail to pay your dues, you are punished and stripped and beaten by the Duke's lackeys, left only with a note of warning of what is to come if you don't pay on time next time. Found unconscious and half-naked, a friendly stranger drags you to relative safety and leaves you some basic supplies and a note hinting at the possibility of you joining his group of survivors if you can prove yourself. Determined to survive and figure out what's going on around here, you pick yourself up. You build, you scavenge, you fortify and explore. On this journey of survival, you piece together hints toward the truth. A nuclear war left the world in ruins, and Navezgane might be one of the last few places not completely decimated by the war. However, an illness that perhaps you have some form of immunity to has spread across the world. Perhaps this illness was released in the form of a bioweapon during the previously mentioned Third World War. Perhaps there was a nasty flu going around and the radiation from the bombs mutated it. Either way, those who perish from this illness change. And when they change, they reanimate as mindless, violent shells of what they once were. Basic feral creatures that seek only to sleep, kill, and eat. As you deal with larger and larger groups of stronger and stronger hordes, it becomes apparent their mindless rage is so strong, even brick walls cannot withstand them for long. But a glimmer of hope, there must be others out there. A plane airdrops in supplies relatively near your location on a regular basis. These supplies and these caches, however, are sometimes scarce or not entirely helpful, and the plane itself doesn't seem very new. Perhaps there are people out there, not the government, but good people that want to help you or any other survivors in the area. Maybe they can't get to you because of the radiation in between you and them. Maybe they don't want to risk bringing someone in from a contaminated zone. Either way, you're not entirely alone. But as you discover, you sort of are, at least in your immediate area. Those airdrops are never picked up by anyone else. Exploring Navezgane, you find remnants of the other survivors' hideouts, defenses, caches of supplies, fortifications, and even entire small settlements are spread throughout the county. But never any survivors, just more zombies. Perhaps all of the other survivors are being picked off, turning. You find notes with challenges from people apparently watching you, but never the people that left them. Perhaps not all of these notes are actually for you. The only people you can find are people in fortified areas who are willing to trade with you, but they never leave their shops. And you can't really blame them. If all of their friends are dead and all they have left is a fortified shop, perhaps you're the crazy one for venturing into the unknown. And venturing into that unknown, you also discover there were efforts to contain this disease, But clearly, whoever was performing this research has also been taken by the mutant flu. Even military installations were eventually put in place. Maybe they were trying to help stop the spread of the disease. Maybe they were installed to help protect populations. Maybe they were installed to help eliminate populations. Regardless of what they were here for, even they fell prey to the end times. The hordes of zombies grow more intense as the weeks go by. Perhaps the unknown flu that has infected the deceased populations of the world is mutating from the radiation that covers much of the planet and surrounds you in Navezgane. The idea that this all went down fairly recently, and that the radiation is playing a major role, is supported by the fact that you do see more and more strange and glowing zombies over time. It's probably only a matter of time before you succumb as well. All there is left to do is survive. Survive as long as you can. Perhaps those people sending in supplies from afar will find a way to get to you, or you might find a way to get to them, but you can't focus on that now. The hordes approach. The moon turns crimson in honor of the blood that will be spilled. All you can do now is make sure that spilled blood isn't your own.